Hello, Carol here from Speak Fluent English. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about 5 common business grammar mistakes that professionals make sometimes and how you can fix them. So let's get into it. So poor grammar costs credibility, contracts and careers because grammar is not only about precision, it's also about clarity and professional authority. Business writing is permanent, so things like emails, reports, proposals, etc., are read, reread, forwarded, and so these errors can compound over time. Professionals with grammar errors in their profiles receive fewer promotions quite often and are sometimes seen as a bit less competent. In client facing communication, a single mistake can undermine trust built up over months. So the 5 errors covered today are subtle because they're widely made, so they often go unnoticed until they damage your reputation. So let's have a look at our first error. So the first one is misusing I and me in professional correspondence. So our example here, please send the reports to John or I. It's not correct. What you should be saying is please send the report to John and me. So the rule here is to use I as the subject of the sentence, the doer, and use me as the object of the sentence, the receiver. So here's a quick test you can do to make sure you've got it right. Just simply remove the other person from the sentence. So would you say, please send the report to I? No, you wouldn't. So use me. And another example here is between you and I. That's often said, but the correct way to say this is between you and me. Okay, so error number 2. This one is very, very common, confusing fewer and less. So let's have a look at our example. We had less complaints this quarter. So because complaints is a countable noun, we should be using fewer. So we had fewer complaints this quarter. So the rule here is to use fewer for countable nouns for things like complaints, employees, errors, and use less with uncountable nouns, so things like time, effort, revenue, etc. So here are some more examples. There are fewer vendors on the approved list because vendors is a countable noun. The new process requires less time because time is an uncountable noun. We have fewer options available now because options is a countable noun. So why does this matter? We're using the correct term, just shows precision and it maintains credibility. Okay, so error number 3 is those dangling modifiers that can mislead the reader. So our example here is having reviewed the proposal, the budget was approved. So the good thing to say is having reviewed the proposal, the committee approved the budget. The introductory phrase must be logical and connect the subject of the main clause. So the budget didn't review the proposal, a person or a group did. So let's have a look at a couple more examples. So walking into the meeting, the projector failed. So the better way to say this, to create the correct understanding, is as we walked into the meeting, the projector failed. To improve performance, the schedule was revised. So the better way to say this is to improve performance, the team revised the schedule. So why does it matter? Well, dangling modifiers create ambiguity and can also obscure accountability. And this can be serious in things connected to legal matters, financial matters, and executive communication in general. Okay, so our error number 4 is the subject-verb agreement with collective nouns. So have a look at our example. The management are reviewing it. So the US standard is to say the management is reviewing it. So use the singular. And in the second example here, the committee have decided. So the US standard is the committee has decided. So collective nouns, for example, the team, board, staff, are treated as singular units in American English. But in British English, the plural forms of the verbs are common. So I'm British English, so it's quite natural for me to use the plural form. So to say the management are reviewing it and the committee have decided. But in a global business context, the American conventions are used as standard. So if you are working for a multinational company, it's much more likely that you'll be using the American English. So try and stick to the American standard if you can. But that's not really an easy thing for me being a native British speaker, because I always want to use the plural, which is more common. So for me, I always want to say the committee has decided, for example. But here's another very common pitfall. Let's have a look at this. So a number of employees are leaving. So a takes the plural verb. But if you talk about the number of employees, so the number of employees takes the singular verb. So again, another common mistake people make, very, very subtle, but one to watch out for. Okay, so our next mistake, our final one, error number 5, is misusing which and that, especially in formal writing. So let's have a look at our first example. So if the clause is essential to the meaning and it specifies which item you're talking about, use that. So the strategy that we implemented last year has succeeded. If we go over to the non-restrictive clause, use which. So something that adds extra information that can be removed without changing the core meaning. But we use the which and also add a comma. So the correct example here, our sales strategy, which we implemented last year, has succeeded. Okay, so the comma test. So if you can remove the clause and the sentence will still make sense, use which with commas. If not, use that. So if we have a look at our that example, so the strategy has succeeded. It's not really quite clear which strategy you mean. So adding that extra information, the strategy that we implemented last year. So we must use that to make the meaning clear. With our which example, so our sales strategy has succeeded. So which we implemented last year is a bit of extra information, but if we take it away, it doesn't change the core meaning. So we can say our sales strategy has succeeded, or to add that extra information, our sales strategy, which we implemented last year, has succeeded. Okay, so here's a quick cheat sheet. So the error type. So I versus me, please contact John or I. Should be please contact John or me. Fewer versus less. We had less complaints. Should be we had fewer complaints, because remember, complaints is a countable noun. The dangling modifier, having reviewed it, the budget was approved. Should be having reviewed it, the committee approved the budget. So our collective nouns, the team are ready. So good to use the American standard. The team is ready, especially if you're working in a multinational global company. So which versus that? The report which we filed should be the report that we filed. Okay, so practical strategies to avoid these errors. So remove the person from the I, me. So send it to I. No, that sounds wrong. Send it to me. So the count it questions. So before writing less, ask if you can count the item, if it's a countable noun. If it is yes, use fewer. And then read aloud to check. So read opening phrases aloud. So ask who is doing this to catch the dangling modifier. So our systematic habits. So default to singular. So for collective nouns in US business writing, treat terms, boards, etc. as singular units consistently. Try and get into that habit, although, I'll be honest, I don't find that one easy, because it's more natural for me to use the British standard. So the comma test, remember, if a clause can be from a sentence can be removed without changing the core meaning, use which with commas. And also, if you really, really get stuck, use tools wisely. So you can use things like Grammarly or Microsoft Editor or even a translator as a safety net, but always evaluate suggestions against these rules. So although these tools, Grammarly, Microsoft Editor, and online translators, they can be really, really helpful, they may not always be correct. So do double check. Okay, so grammar mastery is a leadership competency. So the business case for excellent grammar, clarity drives decisions, global communication precision, credibility is cumulative, and grammar reflects thinking. So I'll let you just pause the video here and read a bit more if you want a bit more information. So finally, the 5 errors corrected, your writing becomes your strongest asset. Okay, again, so pause the video, have a look, have a read through if you want to clarify anything further. Okay, so before we go, here are some recommended sources. So Grammarly for Business, and also there's the Merriam-Webster Usage Online Dictionary. Again, translators, but just be careful with them. They may not always be correct. And nowadays, the AI tools as well. So your Chat GPT, Microsoft Copilot, again, those can be very, very useful tools. So thank you so much for watching. So if this video was helpful to you, please like and subscribe and share. And at the time of recording this video, I am doing one-to-one lessons online with people. So if you would like to book a one-to-one lesson with me online, you can do that at my website, www.speakfluentenglish.co.uk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye-bye for now.